at that age, but an acute sense of humiliation prevented any retort. Jesus being the Son of God and Saviour to all mankind, while Michael's career aspirations having thus far reached the meteoric height of a controller for office administration in the civil service. "Someone like Julie," Rose urged. "She was nice. I miss her." He had met Julie 2 years ago in a dark pub, and had almost convinced himself that she hadn't only agreed to go out with him because he casually mentioned to her that he had won 2 backstage passes to the Kings of Leon in Marley Park for the following evening. It had been a great gig. So much so that he had stuck around for almost an hour even after he'd seen Julie being led by the bassist's hand into his dressing room. Michael had asked her to meet him for their second and final date at his house just to prove to his parents that he wasn't gay. Not that he had anything against being gay. In fact, he often thought his life would be somehow a lot less complicated if he were attracted to men. He suspected, though, that he would still be seen as even less of a catch to the generally good-looking gay community. Embarrassingly, he had feigned a prolonged phantom relationship with Julie, often leaving the house to attend the cinema alone or to read the newspaper in a quiet pub. Eventually they had broken up, and despite his mother's inquiries, he had insisted there was nothing to talk about. A line that was ironically the only piece of truth in their entire 6-month fantasy affair. "Here, son, buy a drink for yourself," Rose whispered, shoving a €20 note into his hand. "Thanks, ma'am," Michael said, slipping it into his pocket. "Will you have a slice of cake before you go?" "No thanks, ma'am, I'm grand." "Why don't you take it with you to the pub to share with your friends?" I don't think so. Why not give some to Dad?" "OK, then. Enjoy yourself tonight, Michael," she said, cutting a slice and popping it onto one of the small Mickey Mouse paper plates that were stacked beside the cake. "Might shut him up for a while," she added with a smile, and carried it into him. It was already dark when Michael reached Harry's pub, a short 10 minutes' walk from his house. The pub was run by a bald-headed 50-year-old called Harry Brennan, or Hard Harry as everyone, including his mother, called him. Michael pulled the heavy door open, allowing the light and heat of the crowd and the cacophony of chatter, clinking glasses and laughter to temporarily spew onto the street. Above the din he heard the cackled laugh of Joey McGinnis, and instinctively moved to the opposite end of the bar. Michael couldn't remember a time when he didn't know or didn't hate Joey McGinnis. From junior infants to present day, Joey had always been a part of his life, like a bad smell that just wouldn't go away. "Wherever Joey is, that's where the party is," he'd heard someone once say. "Yeah, and the fight afterwards," someone had added. There were many reasons that Michael hated Joey. At age 6, they had a fight in first class in the schoolyard. Mrs. Connolly had caught them and made them shake hands, which they did. But as soon as she had turned her back and walked away, and while still shaking hands, Joey had punched Michael hard in the stomach with his 6-year-old clenched left fist. Then, when Michael was 12, he did something he swore he'd never do again, and had kept that promise to this day. He'd volunteered. He liked the drama teacher, Mrs. Kelly, perhaps even had a teenage crush on her. So when she asked for someone to read the welcoming monologue at the Christmas school play, Michael's hand had shot into the air. He had voiced his concerns later on to Mrs. Kelly, but she insisted he would get over his fears, and that it would be all right on the night. It wasn't. At first he froze in front of the 200-seated parents in the large hall. He could hear Mrs. Kelly's voice encouraging him to speak. He could hear the principal's voice threatening him to get off. He could do neither. Next, the giggles began. Barely suppressed sniggers from the audience, shouts of "Get on with it!" from some older students. He willed his body to move, but his feet stayed planted on the wooden stage. And then the warmth. At first it was almost pleasant. He could feel the trickles down his left leg. The giggles turned to pointing and laughter. It probably only lasted 20 seconds before Mrs. Kelly walked on stage and put her arm around him and walked him off. But it felt like 20 minutes. Even today he sometimes woke to those hundreds of eyes looking at him and the laughter ringing in his ears. Joey McGinnis may not have come up with it initially, but it was from him that he first heard his name.